So you already know the basics of SSMS. I'll show you some more advanced tips to really improve how you use this tool. Tip number 1 is called block editing. Say you've got some code here and you want to make the same change to multiple lines, such as changing this number from 13 to 11. You could make the change to one line, move to the next, make the next change and keep going. Or you could use a concept called block editing. This allows you to select characters in the same position but on different lines, and then make the change once. To do this, click where you want the cursor to be. Then hold Shift and Alt and drag your cursor down and across to highlight the area that you need. We can see that this same character is highlighted on all rows. Now we can make one edit and the text is edited on all rows at once. This is helpful if you have similar rows and want to make a change. You can also do this by placing the cursor somewhere and pressing Shift, Alt and down to move the cursor down. To return to a normal cursor, press Escape. When you run a query, you see the results at the bottom of the screen. You can resize this results panel to make it larger or smaller. You may want to close the results panel so you have more room for your SQL query. But there is no Close or X button on the panel. Is it possible to close it? Yes, it is. You can hide the results panel by pressing Ctrl and R. This will hide the panel and show the query with more space. You can press Ctrl R again to show the results panel. The Object Explorer on the left of the screen is a helpful way to see what tables and other objects are on the database. If you see a table in the list, you can query it by right-clicking on it and generating a select query to a script. But if you've already started writing a query and have found the table you want to query in this list, you'll want to easily add that table to your query. You could start typing it, or you can simply drag the table name from the Object Explorer into your query. When you do this, the schema name and table name are added to the query. This is a helpful way to populate the table name into your query. Sometimes you've got your table name in your query and you need to specify the columns. You don't want to use select star because you want to specify the columns individually. There is a simple way to do this in SSMS. First, expand the table section in the Object Explorer and find the table that has the columns you want to add. Expand the table and you'll see a folder here called Columns. You can drag this Columns folder to the query editor. When you do, all of the columns in the table will be added to the query. This is faster than typing them all out. You can then remove the columns you don't need or make any other changes to your query. The column names are enclosed in square brackets. If you don't want that, you can use Find and Replace to remove them. SSMS lets you open many queries, and each of them are shown in different tabs, as you probably know. However, there's a little icon on the top right of each tab next to the X button that closes the tab. It's a little pin icon. If you click this, the pin changes from sideways to up and down, and the tab is pinned. This means the tab will remain on the far left of the tabs, even when new tabs are added. You can actually show pinned tabs on a new row by changing one of the settings in SSMS. To do this, go to Tools, then Options. Expand Environment and then click on Tabs and Windows. There's a checkbox here labelled Show Pinned Tabs in a separate row. Check this to turn it on and click OK. This means the tab will be shown on a new tab row here. This is helpful if you have a specific tab or query that you want to easily navigate to, and if you have a lot of query tabs open. If you prefer the tabs in a single row, you can turn this off. If you've enjoyed these tips so far and want to remember them for when you use SSMS, then you'll love this cheat sheet I put together. It contains all of the tips and keyboard shortcuts mentioned in this video in one easy PDF. Get your copy at the link in the description. SSMS has a feature called Intellisense, which helps you write SQL by showing you a list of objects that match what you're typing, and showing red underlines under parts of your code that may cause errors. Sometimes this doesn't quite work. If you create a new table and then try to select from it, you may see the red underlines here. This happens because Intellisense uses a cache, which stores information about the database that it needs, but it can become out of date. This is an easy fix though. We can refresh the Intellisense cache by going to Edit, then Intellisense, then Refresh Intellisense Cache. Or we can press Ctrl-Shift-R. This will refresh the cache, hopefully fixing any red underlines that shouldn't be there, and fixing the drop-down list for auto-completing objects as you type. When you write an SQL statement and start typing the name of an object, such as a table name or a column name, the Intellisense feature will show you a list of options that match what you have typed. You can click on an item in the list and the query will use it. Or you can use the keyboard, which is much faster. Press down to go down the list of items and up to go back up the list. Then press either Tab or Enter to use the selected item. Your query will be updated to use this item and you can keep writing your SQL. On the topic of Intellisense, there are actually two modes. One is called completion mode and the other is called suggestion mode. The difference is that completion mode will force you to make a selection from the list, and suggestion mode will offer suggestions but let you type something else. You may be using completion mode and find it not very helpful, or just might think that Intellisense doesn't work that well. You can change the mode by going to Edit, then Intellisense, then Toggle Completion Mode. This can also be changed with the keyboard shortcut Ctrl-Alt-Space. Try this out and see if you find it easier to use. On the top left of the SSMS screen is a drop-down box that indicates the database you are currently using. If you want to change this, you can click on it and select a new value. However, there's a keyboard shortcut for this. Press Ctrl-U and the value in this database drop-down will be selected. You can start typing the name of the database you want to use and the name will be automatically completed. Press Enter once you have the database to use and it will be changed. Using this keyboard shortcut is faster than using the mouse, especially if you change databases often. If you need to copy and paste a lot of different values, you might be doing this by copying a value, then pasting it where you need to, then repeating for each value. This may seem easy, but it's a bit of a hassle if you're copying and pasting all over your query. There's a feature in SSMS that makes this easier, and it's called the Clipboard ring. It allows you to copy multiple values and then paste each of them where you need. To use this, first copy each of the values you need to copy. Then go to the place where you want to paste the first one. Press Ctrl-Shift-V to paste from the clipboard ring. This will paste the most recently copied value. If you want the one before that, you can press Ctrl-Shift-V again. You can keep going with this shortcut and pasting your copied values wherever you need to. This can be a real time saver. There's a narrow bar shown here to the left of your SQL queries. This is normally where line numbers are shown in other SQL editors. SSMS has this feature, but it's turned off by default. To show these line numbers, go to Tools, then Options. Go to Text Editor, then All Languages, then General. There's an option here called Line Numbers. Click the checkbox to turn it on. While we're here, if you know the setting you want to change but not sure where it is, you can use this search box to look for it. If I type line num in here, then the list is filtered to sections that mention that string. We can see the general option is shown here, which has the line numbers checkbox. Click OK to close this window. The line numbers are now shown on the grey bar next to the editor, which can be helpful when finding certain places in your file or working with errors. You can navigate to a specific line number by pressing Ctrl-G and entering a line number. This can make it easy to navigate around long queries and scripts. Adding comments to code is a helpful way to explain why certain choices were made or to communicate with other developers or yourself in the future. It's also helpful to stop code from being executed. You can comment a part of your query using a keyboard shortcut. To comment the line where your cursor is, press Ctrl-K, then Ctrl-C. To uncomment the line, press Ctrl-K, then Ctrl-U. You can also do this by selecting multiple lines, not just a single line. Your SQL code may be written in uppercase, lowercase, or a mix of both. If you want to change the case of parts of your code, you could delete the words and retype them. Or you can change the case using SSMS. To do this, select a word or a piece of code for which you want to change the case. Press Ctrl-Shift-U to change to uppercase, or press Ctrl-Shift-L to change to lowercase. This can be helpful if you want to change the case of text without having to retype it. If you have multiple query tabs open in SSMS, you can click on a title to show the tab. An easy way to do this is to press Ctrl-Tab. This will open a small dialog box with the names of all the tabs as long as you keep holding the Control key. Press Tab to cycle through the list of query tabs you have open and release the Control button to open the selected tab. This can be helpful if you have a lot of tabs open. If you're working on a long query, you might find yourself scrolling up and down to look at different parts of it. You can actually show two different parts of a query at once by dragging this little icon on the top right down to the middle of the screen. This will create two views of the same query. You can scroll them independently, meaning you can show different parts of the same query at once. Once you've finished, you can drag the divider back to the top of the window and a single view will be shown. The view that contains your cursor will be the one that is kept. The next tip is about a feature called Snippets. A snippet in SSMS is a pre-written piece of code that allows you to fill in the blanks and run. SSMS has a range of built-in snippets that can save you time with writing your own code. There are snippets for creating procedures, altering tables, creating indexes, and more. To add a snippet, press Ctrl-K, then Ctrl-X. Choose a snippet from this list to insert. The code for the chosen snippet is added to the query editor. Many of the snippets have parameters such as table names and schema names. The first of the parameters is highlighted, so if you want to change it, you can start typing. Press Tab to go to the next parameter, if it exists, and make any changes you need. Once you've finished updating the parameters, press Escape to exit. Your code snippet is now ready to run. Another use for snippets is to surround your existing code with a snippet of code. A good example of this is begin and end. You may have some code that you want to add a begin statement before it and an end statement after it. Rather than typing it manually, you can add a snippet for this. Select your code, then right-click on it. Select Surround With. Select the snippet of begin and end. Your selected code will now be surrounded by begin and end. There are other snippets you can use, such as if and while, that could also be useful. If you want to increase the text size in your editor to make it easier to read, or if you're presenting to others, you can do it in two ways. First, you can zoom in with these buttons on the editor or holding Ctrl and scrolling the mouse wheel up and down. This will change the zoom level temporarily, but won't be saved if you exit SSMS and reopen it. A permanent way to change the text size is in the Options. Go to Tools, then Options. Go to the Environment section, then Fonts and Colors. You can change the size of the font here, which is saved if you close and reopen SSMS. By default, when you run a select query, the results are shown in a panel at the bottom of the screen. If you prefer, you can get the query results to show on a new tab. To enable this, go to Tools, then Options. Go to Query Results, then SQL Server, then Results to Grid. Check this box that says Display Results in a separate tab. You can also check this box below it if you like, which will switch to the New Results tab when the query is finished. Click OK and you'll return to the editor. If you run the query again, it might seem like nothing has changed, and you're right. To use the new option, you'll need to open a new query editor. When you do this, you can see it looks a little different. We have a tab called Editor here and one for Messages. If we run the query, then it stays in the full size of the panel. A new tab appears called Results, which we can click on and see the results. This allows us to get a large view of our query and also the results. If you prefer the default behavior, you can change the option back to what it was in the Options menu. In your query editor, you can use the Search and Replace feature by going to Edit, then Find and Replace, then Quick Replace, or pressing Ctrl-H. This is helpful if you want to replace values in your code. However, it also includes regular expression support. This can be used in a range of ways, but the most common way I've used it is to replace tabs and new line characters. For example, if you have a script that has 2 lines between each statement, and you want to convert it to a single line, you can use Find and Replace for this. In the Find section, you can search for a new line by using either /r or /n and ensuring that this regular expression button is enabled. If we want to replace 2 new lines with one, we find 2 new lines and replace it with one like this. We run this and the code is updated. Sometimes we need to play around with different combinations of these characters depending on our file. If you want to find or replace tab characters, use /t. You can also use combinations of regular expressions and other characters, such as adding a new line after every semicolon. If you see a function in your code and don't quite know what it does or what the parameters are, you can open the documentation for it pretty easily. Highlight the function, then press F1. This will open the Microsoft documentation for this function, which shows what it does, what the parameters are, and some examples. This is an easy way to find out more about the function. Sometimes when working with SQL, we want to find out a bit more about a table. We could query the data dictionary or open the properties for the table in the Object Explorer. There is an easier way. We can highlight a table name and press Alt F1. This will run a few different queries on the database and show a range of information about the table at the bottom of the screen. I've done this on the book table here. This can be helpful for quickly learning a bit more about any table you're working with. When you have a long query, the scroll bar on the right will let you scroll up and down. You probably knew this already. You can actually change the scroll bar to show something else, which could be more helpful to you. We can change it to something called map mode. To do this, right-click on the scroll bar and select Scroll Bar Options. In the Behavior section, change it from bar mode to map mode here. You can leave the Show Preview tooltip selected and press OK. The scroll bar now shows a small preview of the file, which is very similar to Visual Studio Code if you've seen that. You can click on it and scroll just like the scroll bar. You can also hover over part of it and see the preview of that part of the file, which makes it easy to find the part you're looking for. The next tip is more of a general Windows tip, but it can really save time. Press the Alt key and the toolbar menu is highlighted. You can use the left and right arrows to navigate between the different menus, or press any of the underlined letters on the keyboard to expand that menu. For example, press F to expand the File menu. Then you can press up and down to navigate that menu, or press one of the underlined letters to run that command. This can be quicker than using the mouse to open the menus. And over time, you'll start to remember the combinations you use the most. You can then press Alt and a few keys to quickly run the command you need. If you run a select query, you'll see the results in a panel here. Your cursor is still in the query. If you want to move to the results panel to copy the rows or navigate with the keyboard, you can press F6. The focus moves to the results and you can use the keyboard in this panel now. You can press F6 to go to the Messages panel and then to the Query panel. Each of your query tabs has a title here. This title contains a lot of information about the connection, file name, database name, and more. The details shown in this title can be configured. To do this, go to Tools, then Options. Open Text Editor, then Editor tab and Status bar here. You can configure the status bar, which is handy, but we're looking for the tab text section here. You can see all of the available fields or pieces of information you can add and remove: database name, file name, login name, and server name. Make the adjustments you need and click OK to save your changes. From now on, any new tabs you open will follow the new structure of the tab name. If you've opened a new file in SSMS, it's opened in a new tab here. Because it's an existing file, there are a couple of things you can do with this tab. Right-click on the tab and select Copy Path, and the full path to the file is added to the clipboard. You can paste this into your editor if needed, or anywhere else. Another thing you can do is right-click on the tab and select Open Containing Folder. This will open the Windows Explorer to the location that contains this file. This is handy if you want to see where the file is. Let's look at a few tips related to the Object Explorer panel. You can browse the Object Explorer to find tables, procedures, and other objects in your database. A handy feature is called Object Explorer Details. Click on any object and press F7. This will open a new tab called Object Explorer Details, which shows a range of information about the selected object. Another helpful way to use this is to select the Tables folder here and then press F7. You can see a list of all tables here. This is a little helpful, but we can make it even better by customizing the columns that we see. You can right-click on the headings here and show or hide other columns. We can add things like space used, index space used, and row count. This is an easy way to see the largest tables on your database. You can sort by these columns to show the tables with the most number of rows or the most space used. You can also use this filter feature here to filter on tables in a certain schema or some other attribute. You can also filter objects in the Object Explorer panel itself. To do this, go to the type of object you want to filter, select Filter, then Settings. Enter the criteria you want to use for your filter and click OK. The list of objects will be updated to match the filter. You can remove the filter by going back to the same window and clicking Clear Filter. If you enjoy these tips so far and want to remember them for when you use SSMS, then you'll love this cheat sheet I put together. It contains all of the tips and keyboard shortcuts mentioned in this video in one easy PDF. Get your copy at the link in the description. You may know that you can generate an SQL script to create a table by right-clicking on a table, selecting Generate Script, then Create, then New window. This will generate a Create Table script, but it won't include any data in the table. If you want to also have the data included in the script, you can, but the option is a little hidden. Let's see how we can do that. Right-click on the database and select Tasks, then Generate Scripts. On the Welcome screen, click Next. On the Choose Object screen, click the Select Specific Database Objects button, then find the table you want to export. We'll look for the Order Status table. Once it is selected, click Next. On the Set Scripting Options page, select Open in New Query window. Click the Advanced button here. Scroll down to this Types of Data to Script field. By default, it's set to Schema only, which is just the Create Table statement. Change this to say Schema and Data, which means the insert statement is included. Click OK and complete the wizard by clicking Next a couple of times. The script will be generated on a new window, and it includes both the Create Table statement and the Insert statement. When you create stored procedures in SQL Server, you often refer to database tables. By doing this, we create a dependency between the stored procedure and the table. We can view the dependencies for a table pretty easily in SSMS. Right-click on a table and select View Dependencies. We can see a window appears that shows the dependencies. We can see dependencies in both directions, objects that this table depends on and objects that depend on this table. We can see some here that show foreign keys to other tables, which is a kind of dependency. Stored procedures can also be shown in this list. There are a range of built-in reports in SSMS that let you see a range of information about the database. They are pretty easy to open. Right-click on a database, select Reports, then Standard Reports. We can see a range of reports here. You can click on any of them and the report will be shown. We'll click on this one called Disk Usage by Table and we can see the report in a new tab. Once you've finished, click the X to close the tab. When you have a connection in SSMS, it shows in the Object Explorer list here. However, in SSMS there's a concept called registered servers. This will essentially allow you to save a connection to the database, create groups of connections, and much more. I'll show you how to create a registered server. First, they are shown in a separate panel which is not shown by default. To show them, go to View, then Registered Servers. This panel appears. You can expand local server groups and you may see a couple of connections. They are all contained within local server groups and you can create a new group by right-clicking and selecting New Server Group. If you have a lot of servers or connections you work with, then this registered server feature might be useful for you. Now that you have a group of servers, one helpful thing you can do is run a query against multiple servers. Let's say we have a bunch of servers here and we want to know what version of SQL Server they are running. To do this, we can right-click on the local server group and select New Query to run a query on all servers. Or we can select multiple servers in the group and right-click and select New Query. Either way, we get a new query window. We can write this query to find the version of SQL Server. Then click Execute and see the results here. On the results panel, we can see a single result set which has a list of the servers and their version. SSMS has actually run the same query on multiple servers and combined them into a single result. This can be very helpful if you work with multiple servers. If you work with many servers, you may find this tip useful as well. SSMS lets you specify a color for a connection. This color will be shown in a few places when this connection is active. A common example of this is to use red for a production database, yellow for a testing database, and green for dev. To specify a color, you'll need to have the server set up as a registered server, which we covered earlier in this video. Right-click on a server in the list here and select Properties. Click on the Connection Properties tab. At the bottom, check Use Custom Color. Then click Select and select the color you want to use. I'll choose red for this example. Once we save it, any new queries on this server will show the color on the bottom of the screen here. If you're working on a query but realize you're on the wrong connection, you could open a new query editor on the right connection and copy the query to the new editor. But that takes a few steps. An easier way to do it is to right-click on the editor, select Connection, then Change Connection. You'll see a list of all connections or registered servers in SSMS. Choose the one you want and click on it. The query editor will use the connection you have selected. Let's move on to some tips in other areas of SSMS. When you have a query and want to see the execution plan, you can click this button here. Sometimes the execution plan doesn't quite fit in this panel. We could drag the scroll bars to move around the plan, but there is another way. You can click on this small button on the right of the execution plan tab here and a small box appears. Drag the box around and your view of the execution plan will change. This is a quick way to move around the execution plan, which is helpful if it's a complex query and the plan is quite large. On the top right of SSMS is a small text box labelled Quick Launch. You can type into this box and you'll get a list of commands and settings that match what you have typed. This is a simple way to find what you are looking for without browsing through the menus. For example, let's say we want to go to a specific line. We can type line and see a list of options that match this. We see some commands such as go to line, tabify selected lines, line indent, and some options at the bottom. Click on the Go To line here and you'll see the window here for finding a line number. We could have selected any other option in the list. Using this quick launch feature can be pretty helpful. There are a lot of commands in the SQL language. Some of them we use all the time, but there is a lot that we don't know about or don't use very often. SSMS has a handy feature called templates, which is a predefined SQL script. To view the templates, go to View, then Template Explorer. On the right, the Template Explorer is shown. We see many folders here for different types of objects. Let's say we want to create an index. Expand the index folder and we can see a range of templates here. We can double-click on the template in the list and a new tab is opened with the SQL as a template. Or we can drag the name of the template into a tab. The SQL is shown to create an index. You can edit the SQL as needed, such as specifying the columns and table. The parts inside the angled brackets here are parameters. An easy way to specify these is to go to Query, then specify value for template parameters. A new window is shown that has all of the parameters in the query. You can specify values for them and click OK and the SQL will be updated. You can then run the query. In this example, the index would be created. A great way to organize your SQL scripts is to use a project in SSMS. To create a project, go to File, then New, then Project. A window appears. Select SQL Server Scripts, enter a name for the project and click OK. You'll see a Solution Explorer tab opened on the right. Your project or solution is shown at the top here. There's an entry for connections, queries, and miscellaneous. Right-click on Queries and select New Query. A new query is added under the Queries entry called SQL Query 1. A new tab is opened for that query as well. You can write your queries and save them, and they are all saved into this project or solution. This is a handy way of organizing your SQL scripts in SQL Server. You can close the project or solution by going to File, then Close Solution. We covered a lot of SSMS tips in this video. You'll want to watch this video next, where I share 20 years of advice for working with databases and SQL to really help your SQL skills and avoid some of the mistakes I've made. Thanks for watching.